Welcome to DevSecOps, the good, the bad, the ugly. Good to be back. This videocast series, if you're not familiar with it, we focus on all things related to DevOps, rugged DevOps, building security into the process of building secure software. Shua, thanks for joining me again for the final part of our 3-part series here.
Absolutely. It's, I have to first and foremost say thank you because it's just been fun to be able to talk and especially in a conversational standpoint, be able to talk and hopefully, I'm not the only one solving problems, but hopefully this is giving people kind of food for thought of your voice. You do have a voice in this industry, right? And I think that there's so many smart people out there and there's so many people that are trying to solve this problem is that if we keep quiet and we hoard solving problems to ourselves, we're not doing anyone any justice. And so I kind of thank you for allowing me to be a part of this, but also would try to tell people who are wondering, do I come out and do I write something about what I'm experiencing? To absolutely say yes. It's critical to get the feedback. It's critical to talk about your success stories, but more importantly, and I think this is where we're going to get today, is to talk about your failures.
Yep, you hit it on the hit it on the nail there. So yeah, I mean, really, what we wanted to do is come back for a third time to talk about some of the things that you learned through the hard knocks.
It's been hard knocks. It's been a hard knock life. They should turn that into a song or something, right?
Maybe I'll cue the background music.
You should. But yeah, thinking about trying to go back and think about not only kind of going back to even our part 1, right? Like sure. Where has my career come from and what has the experiences done from 5 years ago, starting in the security space, to how has it shaped me directionally to where I am today in delivering and owning a rugged DevOps platform. Yeah. And I think that, when we talk about our failures, don't always just think about you yourself and what you did, but also think about you as an organization. Because for me, the story has been a little bit of how security as an organization and an entity has been failing for years in and of itself on making progress in this space. And when I say that, I don't try to, paint people into a box or make a blanket statement, because there's definitely pioneers in this space. I wouldn't be here 5 years from now if I wouldn't have seen people who are doing the right things in this space. But I do say that, a lot of what I've seen as opportunities have come from my experience as I've worked in different teams from security architecture, cloud security architecture, service management, all of that stuff as we're coming through. Because I think a couple of the biggest things that I've seen as opportunities as I've come up in this space, and you and I were talking about it a little bit beforehand, was security has this innate thing where they think that it's either all or nothing, right? And that when they're working with development teams, that it's either they're looking for vulnerabilities and they'd have this scanning tool or this technology or whatever it is, and we need to put it on full blast because we need to find every vulnerability. It needs to be squeaky clean. And what we forgot was that people need to buy into it.
Right.
That we're actually building software, and developers have timelines that are put together by the business. They have budgets that are put together by the business. Yep. And by failing to just say, well, it's security, they have to do it, versus thinking, okay, we need to build a process. We need to build a relationship. We need to build something that allows us to understand how we effectively do application security. Because I can tell you right now, a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that a technology is application security. I will buy this tool and we can apply application security. And that's one of the biggest failures that I see us doing within the security space, is buying tools to solve problems, as opposed to identifying problems that can be having process and people around it, and then finding the technologies that augment that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm even think there's probably salespeople that are watching this. I mean, really, what what kind of value, right? When you think about community and people that are trying to work with organizations, I mean, really, how do they help solve the problem rather than perpetuate that? Is something that just comes to my mind as a salesperson myself.
Yeah, and I think also salespeople can get a bad rap when it comes down to because they're coming to you usually from a technology standpoint. And all of us have a job, all of us have families to feed. So I always try to give the benefit of the doubt whenever I'm talking in that perspective. But I really want to maybe give a line of advice to also those people that I work with from a sales perspective is. You first and foremost need to know that just like you shouldn't be selling me a technology. You should be selling me a culture. You should be selling me how are you going to be helping me right size a program that drives a process, that drives adoption, that drives the ability to reduce risk to my organization. And then you can tell me how your technology fits into that. And so that goes a lot further than, being taken out to golf or something. You know what I mean? Like us being able to just be able to sit down, have a talk. What's your problem? You'll all solve it. Check out my hooks as my DJ. I'm just kidding. That's another song. We should just be queuing songs everywhere.
You cue them up for me. I'll put them on. Right?
Okay.
So no, that's great. So and I think that's phenomenal advice. I'll definitely take that back, think about it. Hopefully others will as well. So, but obviously for the point of the video cast, I mean, what are some lessons learned? And can you give any specific examples? And maybe how did it make you a better security professional?
Security professional. How do I pick just one though? I mean, there's so many. We have so many mistakes. I'm just kidding. We talked about this a little bit at the beginning, in where like one of the original podcasts, video cast is, when I first went out and I started having these conversations, I think the first thing that we do is I assumed everyone cared about security in the way that I cared about security. Right. And so when I do that, I also then in thinking that I assume that they understand the language of security, that they understand, the knowledge that I have around security. And when you do that, you find really quickly as you're going into conversations, that tends to be a foundation for arguments to like spin out of control. Mm-hmm. And so as you're sitting there trying to have some type of dialogue about where we're going, and I don't care if it's from an architecture, I experienced this from an architecture standpoint, where we were sitting in with a development team, and you start talking about protocols, you start talking about threat modeling, right? Like just the idea of threat modeling with an individual team. You start talking about non-functional requirements or security features, and what happens is that was having a negative rub as I talked about that, like in that particular way to the developers. And what you would happen and what you would see is you would tend to see the conversation get quieter and quieter because there was less of a willingness to talk to each other. And so in taking that back, just that from that specific example, I went back and that's when I started to get more involved in the engineering community. That's when I inserted myself into the chat ops platform that we have here. And to be honest, I was a fly on the wall. I didn't actually even engage in conversation yet. What I did was I read conversation. I tried to see how they communicated. I tried to see how they worked. I tried to understand the language that they used. So when I could go in and instead of talking around vulnerabilities, mm-hmm. I could have a conversation around quality. Right. I could have a conversation around defects. Mm-hmm. I could have a conversation about how security is not some people will probably argue with me there when I say it's like a non-functional requirement, when again, if you buy an automobile, you don't pick the feature of a seatbelt or an airbag or brakes. You just assume that it's in there. Right. And that's a feature that comes with your car and that it works. Right. And so that is one particular moment where I think just when I was working within architecture, that I ran into the language barrier as a huge opportunity or a problem that because I didn't invest into the engineers to understand them and just assumed, well, you know what happens when you assume. And that's kind of what I did to myself in that particular case. And I think maybe one other example has a lot to do with the Optum Security Advocate Program and where it came from. Okay. So when you think of just awareness, which is what the first example was, the next thing you start to assume is skill set. When you think of any type of technology, be it something that we're using to do application security testing, if you think of any process that we put in place, gates that exist particular places for security, the assumption that these individuals have the skill set to be able to deliver on that. Mm-hmm. And what happens is when you make that assumption, you've realized that these individuals have been building their self-development and becoming good developers. And if you sit there and you don't take the time to build a program that rewards people for what they build in both their awareness and their skill set, you start to run the risk of continued barrier to entry into conversations, barrier into entry with success of whatever application security program you have in place. And so that was another big thing of why we built the Optum Security Advocate Program was, all right, a stick is a stick. Every once in a while you get annoyed of being hit by that stick. Mm-hmm. And what we really need to think about is how we're rewarding people also. There's still a legal factor. There's still a policy factor. I totally get it. But how are we rewarding those individuals and bringing the cream to the top and giving them an opportunity to shine among their peers of how well they're learning their skills and their awareness of security within their space, and giving them the benefit of the doubt that they do want to do the right thing. We just need to be able to be a part of that journey with them.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in both those examples I heard, don't assume, right? There's a lot of assuming taking place, right?
Oh yeah. You're in it. Like, I think that, I mean, for no one that is watching this that knows the assume thing, look it up, because then you'll know what I'm talking about. But there's a ton of assumptions on both sides. And I won't say that security is the only thing, right? Yeah. Because collectively as an organization, what happens is everyone assumes. Everyone has their biases. Everyone has their previous experiences that define how they come and react to a conversation, things like that. The one thing that I can say, though, is that for myself, and this should be for anyone that's trying to do this, is that if you're trying to build a relationship and a success, know that it's you can control your attitude. You can't control their attitude. Yeah. And in controlling your attitude, you have the better ability to be able to make yourself calm down, listen, first and foremost, listen, and then be able to pick the 20% of golden nuggets that come out of a conversation, knowing that 80% of it might be something that's just allowing a person to vent, allowing a person to speak out because of all the history that they have, and then being able to take that 20% and then dig, right? You've now found gold. What do you do when you find gold? You start digging for more gold, right? So if you listen and you find that 20 nuggets of gold, what you do is you start focusing on that and start asking the question, help me understand. You said this. Mm-hmm. Help me understand that. Yeah. And you're going to find out that just by doing that, that's not a security problem. That's not a developer problem. That's a human problem. And I think that what I ran into here is that we have a human problem of how we interact with each other, and that can be helpful anywhere. But that's just how it kind of became a part of me from the security space.
This is gold, right? And I appreciate you being willing to come on and share that. I learned a lot. Even just how to engage with people as a salesperson, right? To not assume, because it's going back to that same thing, really, right? What you're talking about is coming down to the human factor, learning, and don't assume people need what you have, right? And understand that. So, Shua, appreciate it. Definitely looking forward to seeing your continued success. I know there's already some people reaching out, wanting to engage with you in regards to the program that you're building within the community. So again, if you're interested, reach out to Shua, and appreciate you coming on here.
Absolutely. And not only, I mean, you can read me through LinkedIn, as everyone is seeing here, or you can right now at least get me at Shua, SHUA @optum.com. and we can just reach out and connect. So thanks again. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Peace.